Today's Rambam, we're learning the Halachic Mechusrei Kaparah, beginning Perek Shlishi. Talks about the dinim of a zov. In other words, like this: the Mechusrei Kaparah, as we know, is those four types of people who are tmeim, the zov and the zava, and the metzera and the yildas, that they have their designated amount of days of tuma for the zov and the zava, and for the metzera it's 7 days. And for the yildas, depending if it's a zachar or if she gave birth to a zachar and a keva, if it's shlishim v'sholish yamim or shishim v'shesh yamim, and then at the end of that day they become tohir. They go to mikveh, they become tohir, but yet their tara is incomplete until the next day they bring a korban. B'yem hashmini of the zav and the zava and the meseira, b'yem pei aleph of the yiladis nekeva, or shishim v'alef liyiladis zachar, they bring a korban, and only after the korban is their tara complete. Also linyan kodshim, that they eat kodshim and go to the Beis Hamikdash. That's the pshat Mechusrei Kaparah. They're lacking the kaparah of the korban. They already went through their days of tumah. They already went to mikveh. They already had harav shemesh, which means that after mikveh the day finished, 7th day of tumah, or whatever the siyum tumah is, and the Mechusrei Kaparah because they have to bring a korban on the next day. That's the general din of Mechusrei Kaparah. Today in Perek Gimel, Halacha Dalid, we learn about a difference in this inyan between the yildas and the other Mechusrei Kaparah. That is, Lagabi, that night before the bringing of the korban. Yeah, the Halacha says Lagabi the Zov, so we'll say Lagabi the Zov. The Zov had 7 days of Tumah, and then the 7th day he went to Mikveh, and then he had Harav Shemesh. So now he's Tohir, but he's a Mechusrei Kaparah. He still has to bring his korban the next day. And on that night, he saw a re'iyah of Ziva, or he saw 3 re'iyahs of Ziva. So seeing new re'iyahs of Ziva requires a new korban for Ziva. The shaila is this still covered all under the korban that he's going to bring for the first Ziva? Because on the other hand, he didn't bring the korban yet for the first Ziva, because it's still night. It's night number 8. So he didn't yet bring the new korban. He didn't yet bring the korban for the first ziva, and now he has a new ziva. So is this ziva mitzdaref to the initial ziva, and it could all be one korban, or do we say no? Yes, that he already finished his 7 days of ziva, and he already went to mikveh, and he had a harav shemesh. So already the initial ziva is finished. So now this ziva is a new ziva, so it requires a new korban. So the Rambam paskins. He says, again in Perek Gimel, middle of Halacha Dalet, he says, Einoi mevi korban sheni al sholos re'iyas elu, ela korban echad al sholos harishenos. Halacha is pashut, is borur, that he doesn't bring an additional korban. It's all covered in the first korban. Sha'af al pi she'ein sholos achreines seisres, even though these 3 re'iyas that he had on the 8th night are not seiser, they don't make him back tummy again, because the 7 days are done. He didn't yet come to the time that it's roi to bring the new korban. Laila is considered mechusar zman. In other words, although it's already the 8th day, but it's night, and you can't bring a korban by night. So it's considered mechusar zman. It's not yet the time of bringing the korban. In other words, if he would see new re'iyas on the 8th day in the morning, even though he didn't bring the korban, it doesn't matter. It's already the zman of the new korban. But the night is not yet the zman of the new korban. It's mechusar zman. So maybe the zman of the korban didn't come yet. If the zman of the korban didn't come yet, so these 3 re'iyas are going to be covered with the old re'iyas, and you bring one korban. Chutz miyeldes shehipila yeledes shehipila bilil shmeinim ve'echod shehi mivia korban sheni kemesha biyarnu ve'davar zeh mipi hakabbalah. The exception to this is the yeledes. Yeledes is also mechusar kaparah. After she had her 66 days of the Meitara, and then the days ended, and now it's by night, and now she has a nefel. Now she gives birth to a nefel. So here Shitake brings a new korban on this nefel, and that's a chutz. That's an exception, and that's Mipia Kabbalah Kamesha Biyarnu. The Rambam mentioned that halacha b'kitzur and halacha in Perek Aleph, halacha ches, different girsois. If you mention it clearly, you're not clearly. Halacha Mishnah is mistapik, but al kapanim that's the halacha. In other words, b'kitzur, that there's a difference between a Yeledes and a Zova, bemes to Yeledes versus everyone else, and that is if the Yeledes is mapil has a nefel, on that night after she finished, the tumah is finished, and she didn't yet bring. It's still the night, so she can't yet bring the korban. So the gabi Yeledes, it's considered a new cheshbon, and you bring a new korban. Mashenkin legabi the other inyanim, legabi zav, and all that. So the other inyanim, his negative to zav, but by zav the halacha is the laila's mechusrei zman. It's not considered. It came to the zman of the new korban, and memela is still nichlal on the old korban. What's the yisayid hadavar? What's the reason for this difference? So the ma'ase is it's a whole sugya. It's a mishnah in Krisos, and bemes the din legabi Yeledes is a machlekes b'shama and b'sila, and it's machlekes b'shama and b'sila in a mishnah in Krisos, which is that if the woman is mapil on the night, hamapelas er l'shmeinim ve'echot, Bishamai Taka says, that it's nichlal on the old korban, just like by Zav. It's nichlal on the old korban because adayin leyotza lizman. You didn't yet go to the 81st day. We didn't get yet to the time we can bring the new korban. So this hapola beleil shmeinim ve'echot is still nichlal on the old korban. That's what Beishamai says. And Basil argues and says, no. Yes, that the tumah is finished already. It's the end of the tumah. So this nefel in the beginning of Belil Shmini Ve'echot is as if it's a new cheshbon. The Basil says a new cheshbon, and it's because the tumah is finished already. So you bring a new korban, and they go back and forth. Basil brings a right to Beishamai, and answers. Basil brings another right. Beishamai answers. That's the mission. And in the Gemara, right at the beginning, it says that Basil responded to Beishamai and said that they have a pasuk. There's an extra pasuk in Lebeinu Lebas, so that's Mar Behamapelas Lil Shmein Echas Lekor. So at the end of the day, Basil had a pasuk. So then the Gemara brings that if Aishia had a suffix, and Aishia asked, Bar Kafra, he asked others. If Aishia asked, so what does Basil hold Legabi Zov? Now, since Legabi Yildis, Basil holds that if you have the nefil by night, it's already considered a new cheshbon. You have to bring a new korban. What does Yol by Zov? Is Beis Hillel's reason because the night is always considered like the new cheshbon? So then by Zav it should also be. Or was Beis Hillel just a limit from a pasuk? If it's a limit by a pasuk, the pasuk only says by Yildis. It doesn't say by the other dinim. And the Gemara goes back and forth, and there's deis lakana. The Gemara is not clear what the halacha is. But the Rambam paskins clearly, like the Mesikelim say, like the shita that Lepeil Beis Hillel was based on a pasuk. In other words, this that Beis Hillel said. That halacha like Basil, of course. This like Basil said that a Yeledes, which is mapil, and Leil Shmein Ve'echot, that is a new cheshbon, is not a klal in korbanos, that always the night is already considered like the new cheshbon of a korban, is dafke a limud miyuchud legabe Yildis. Mashenkin legabe Zov, the halacha taka black dandish, and that's what the Rambam paskins. The Rambam paskins legabe Zov. Yes, that the night is not yet the time of the new korban, so the new korban was never chal. So b'meila, this is nichlal on the old korban. And that's what the Rambam says, that alayla mechusrei zman lakel, aside from yildis, v'davar zeh mipia Kabbalah means that limud that's learned from that pasuk, lebani lebas, the Beis Hillel. Al kapanim, what comes out from here lahalacha? Halacha comes out like this. The Rambam says, the klal is that halayla mechusrei zman lakel, which means that the zman korban is by day, by night it's considered the zman korban did not arrive yet. That's what it means. And therefore, if the Zov saw Re'iyas that night, it wasn't yet the time for the new korban. So this is not, it doesn't make a nuchi of korban, it's all one korban. However, by Yildis, there's a yitzim naklal. The Pashtas, there's a pasuk that says that even if she's mapil by night, she brings a new korban. So what's the concept by Yildis? Are we saying that by Yildis the Laila is not considered Mechusrei Zman? Because the Rambam said that B'chlal Laila is Mechusrei Zman, and Yildis is different. So the Chura came and learned Yildis is different. There's Gzeirus HaKosov. I don't know, Yem Mechusrei Zman, not Mechusrei Zman. By Yildis, there's Gzeirus HaKosov that if she saw Belil Shmeina Ve'echot, she brings a new korban. But from the Lashon Rambam is meduktik, the Rambam learns that by Yildis, the Torah was megala that the Laila is considered not Mechusrei Zman. What's the Lashon Rambam? The Rambam says, "V'halayla Mechusrei Zman hu lekeil chutz miyeled shepila b'leil shmeina v'echad shemivi a korban sheni k'mesha b'yanav v'dover zeh mipiyah kabbalah Laila Mechusrei Zman lekeil chutz miyildis. By a Yildis, Laila is not a Mechusrei Zman. In other words, by Yildis, by Yeledis, when she was mapil lil shmeina v'echad, it's not Mechusrei Zman. It's kilu higiyas man korban already. Nervous, you can't bring it lepoil because it's night. As I saw also in Encyclopedia Talmud, that he brings that deal in the Rambam. He says others tackle learn differently, other achrein learn differently. But in the Rambam is meduyik that by a Yeldis, it's considered Laila lav Mechusrei Zman. So therefore, she had her nefil, the leil pei echod. It's already considered that it was nichnas lizman korban because Laila lav Mechusrei Zman. And dafür hat sich the shaila farvos. Why is there a difference in the klal, in the concept of Laila Mechusrei Zman? If you want to tell me you have exeris hakosah that Yildis, the din is different, so the din is different. But why are we saying that the Torah was megala that by Yildis the gather is different? That by Yildis the leil peyachod is already zman havos hakorban. By Azov the leil shmini is not zman havos hakorban, and by Yildis it's yezman havos hakorban. What's the pshat? So I saw a pshat. It's pshat in the pasuk in the psukim. What does it say in the Torah? When it says by Zov and al derech by Zov and al derech by Mitzayra, the lashon of the Torah is. It says 7 days is Tomei, and then you bring a korban. I'm sorry, and the 7th day you go to mikveh v'tova. But Yom Hashmini you bring a korban. Side by Zov, side by Zova, side by Mitzayra. The lashon of the Torah is Yom Hashmini you bring a korban. By Yildis, what's the lashon pasuk? Uvim leis yemei Torah leben olabas tovi keves meshnas elei. It doesn't say Yom Pei Aleph. It says when do you bring a korban? Bim leis yemei Torah. When are the Yemei Torah finished? At the end of those days? In other words, Leil Pei Aleph is already Meleis Yemei Torah. In other words, in what was the Torah Teilah the Avos HaKorban? By those three, by Zova and Mitzayra, the Torah was Teilah, the Avos HaKorban. In Yom Hashmini, there's 7 days and there's an 8th day. So the Avos HaKorban is another din. It's another shlav. There's a shlav of the 7th day and going to mikveh and Herav Shemesh, end of 7th day. And then there's a shlav of bringing the korban, that's the 8th day. It doesn't say that the 8th day starts after the 7th day. When the end of the 7th day, you bring a korban. It doesn't say, B'mleis Yom HaShvi tovi korban. There's Yom HaShvi and Zaved of Yom Hashmini. The Aved of Yom Hashmini is Avos HaKorban. So that's a new Aved that starts in Yom Hashmini. You can't bring a korban by night. So why would you say that we pass in Laila Mechusrei Zman? The night of the 8th day is not as man Avos HaKorban. As man Avos HaKorban is the 8th day. The Medvar Mamurim, if there's a special din of bringing a korban on the 8th day. So then it starts when you could bring a korban. But if the din of bringing korban is Bimleis Yemei Torah, Tovi Keves, when the Torah finishes, you bring the korban. That means Be'etzem, you bring the korban at the beginning, as soon as the Torah finishes, was the end of the previous day. But you can't lepoil. You can't lepoil. So the mela you bring it in the morning. But there's man avos hakorban is from the night. Sebez is very gishmak in the pshat of the pasuk. The take by Yeledus Besil holds the Torah said name Laila Lav Mechusrei Zman because the Zman avos hakorban is from the end of the matum. Yeledus is different from the others, and that there's a big concept of Zman in the middle of the whole concept of Yemei Torah. Because when you come to the Zov and you come to the Zova and you come to the Mitzayra, so there's 7 days of Tumah, and then there's the end of the 7 days of Tumah. You go to Mikveh, and then there's a korban. There's a Seder. There's 7 days of Tumah, and then there's that night, and then there's the next day. You bring a korban, and then that's the Gemara Kaparah. By Yeledus, in addition, it says. By Yeledus, it says first she's Tomei Shava Yomim or Shvuayim a Zocher Nekev, and then there is a whole concept of Yemei Torah, and then B'mleis Yemei Torah Lebeinu Lebas. So then Tovi Keves Ben Shasei. There was a whole big piece in the middle of 33 days or 66 days of something else, and then as soon as that's finished, we bring the korban. In other words, we were waiting for something to end. There wasn't regular tumah, then tar, then korban. There was tumah, then a big period of time that we're waiting, and when that finishes, we get on with business. We bring the korban. So the whole thing was we were withheld from bringing the korban. As soon as we're finished with that, now we can bring the korban. If now we can bring the korban, that starts at the end of that zman, which is at the end of the 80 days. And the be'etzim, you bring the korban as soon as that ikuv, that big ikuv that was holding you back, called Dmei Tara, the days of Dmei Tara, now you can bring the korban. And b'meila, yes, so it's immediately the zman of korban. Elamai, you can't bring it till the morning. Be'emes, not to go into it b'chlal, it's from for Rebbe Nasicha and Chilik Zayin Tazriya. With Rebbe Tutuf Agavaldik Chidush and Rashi Alatera, that in these passages in the beginning of Tazriya, the Bemis and all those Dmei Tara, she's Bemis Tor B'chlal. There isn't any tumor really. Elamai, she's Mu'ukiv because she can't bring the korban. The whole thing is you're waiting for the korban after the Dmei Tara. And Mil, the Rebbe says that the hair of Shemesh, even of the hair of Shemesh of the 80th night, is different than the hair of Shemesh of a regular Zov and Zova, even Lagabi the dinim of Truma. But the Rebbe says that's the Dafkin Rashi, not in the Gemara. It's Medayik in the Oris. There's a sikha later. I'm just giving you Gemara Mekamis for someone wants to look into it. There's a sikha in Chelik Chov Zayin Tazriya, where the Rebbe talks about the way the Gemara learns it, Alpi Derech HaGemara and Yavamis versus Rashi Alatera. That's Chidushim. If all the Dmei Tarish, is she considered a Tmeya or not? In Halacha, in Gemara, she's considered a Tmeya during the Dmei Tarish, without a doubt. It's called a Tvulas Yem Oruch. The Rambam says later in Mishkav Mesha. Rashi says in Gemara, she's a long Tvul Yem from the Tvila at the end of the 7 days or 14 days until the end of the 66, until the end of the 80 or the 40, 80 or the 60, 80 or the 40. I'm sorry. So she's Tomei throughout all those days. But the whole Tumah of Yildis, and this is the Nekuda, is an unusual thing because there's something in the middle holding us back. The whole concept of the Dmei Tara, of the Yomim, of the 66 days, or the 33 days of Dmei Tara that don't allow to finish up the whole the Kaparah, the Tumah, the Tara and the Kaparah. So Mela the Torah says, "Uvim leis Yemei Tara." As soon as we finished with that, then it's chal the chiyuv of the end of the Tumah and the chiyuv of Vas HaKorban. Ebazei, yes, that the Torah said that it's in such an ephraim, that when this is out of the way, so to speak, are you the reveal? Now we're back to the korban. So then is the korban is chal immediately when that finishes, and that's really that's cholas halayla. Elamai, you can't bring the korban lepoil. That dort and zakman laila lav mechusrei.